Hi, in this video we're going to take a look at branding in Power Apps. We're going to take a look at the inbuilt theming, why it doesn't always work. Then we're going to look at some techniques that we can use to apply theming across an entire app and also across multiple apps. I'll then show you a little app that I've built that brings it all together. So let's take a quick look at what we get out of the box. Initially our Power Apps is set up so that everything comes out blue. So if I use this drop down here, we can see blue highlights and faded blue. The button is blue with some darker blue on hover. The date picker again with some blue on top. Now this is all defined by the theme. So if we go to the Home tab in Power Apps and click the theme drop down, we can see we have the blue theme highlighted. And we have a set of options here that we can change it to. We can use the Office themes, which are a little bit less colourful but still have colours in. We can change it to maybe the purple. So now you can see when I've clicked that, it's changed all of my fields. Now this is great. So if I've used all of these default out of the box fields and I haven't changed any colours, I can simply change the theme. However, the themes here are limited. As of yet, we can't add our own themes into here. And if we change the colour of, say, this button to a green, for example, and then I change the theme, you'll notice that button stays green. So if we are going to do any custom branding or custom colours within our app, they're not going to be picked up. Again, the same with like a header bar. If I choose to use an orange, maybe a white colour there, when I go to change my theme, if I change it to something different, let's go with this, then you'll see that my header bar stays the same and my colours aren't really matching. So we need to come up with a better way. We need to come up with a way to put our own custom colours in and to change those on the fly without having to go through our entire app, which may be 20 screens, who knows, and set in all the colours again. So I'm going to show you a couple of techniques that we can use to do that. So the first technique I'm going to show you isn't the most efficient technique, but it's a really simple and effective way to show you how this works. So when we move on to the more advanced techniques, you'll understand what it is we're trying to do. So I'm going to create a new screen here. I'm going to rename this screen to branding. Now this screen isn't actually going to be shown in my app. People are not going to see it. It's only for me to refer to in my other parts of my app. So on this first screen I have my button. Now I want that button to have a different fill color, but I don't want to change it on that button because I may recreate this button several times. So in my branding screen I'm going to add a new button. So add a new button in here. And I'm going to rename this to branding button. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to change a few things. So I'm going to go and change the color. We're going to have a nice purple color on the button, and maybe we're just going to go into the text. Maybe we'll just change the font to something different. Unreadable, but we'll do that for the sake of it. So now I've got my branding button. So how's that any use to me? If I go back to my first screen and click on my button, now what I can do, rather than setting the color directly as purple, and then if I had 10 of these I'd have to go and do the same, I can go down to the fill, which you can see here is hard coded as an RGBA value, which is a red, green, blue alpha value. So we're going to get rid of that, and we're simply going to refer to our branding button item and refer to the fill. Now what this is going to do, it's going to take the color that I put into my branding button and it's going to use that as the fill color. Now if I create multiple of these buttons and I have them other places in my app, all I simply need to do is click on my branding button here and decide, okay, I want to change the fill color, and now I want the fill color to be blue. If I head back over to screen 1, you'll see all 3 buttons have changed. So all I need to remember to do going forward is to make sure that I'm referencing the branding button, and we can carry on doing the same. And that's all very well, but coding is all about efficiency, so we want to be more efficient. Let's say I have a label and the fill color for my label is the same color as my button because I want to be consistent within my app. I don't want to have too many colors, and the text is white. Now I've had to put 2 different colors into the 2 different objects and I can refer to those. What would be even better is if we just insert another object. Let's use the rectangle, and then we set the fill color on the rectangle to be a certain color. So we've got rectangle here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to rename this to primary color. And then on my button, instead of putting the color on that button, I can go down to the fill and I can change that to be the primary color dot fill. I can do exactly the same with my label, primary color dot fill. So if we go back over to our screen, our buttons are correctly still showing as blue. Obviously we need to change the fill here. So we didn't rename this. So let's just rename this label to branding label. Go back over to this label. So let's set the reference for this label to branding label dot fill blue. Perfect. Now if I go back to my branding screen, instead of having to change the button background color and the label background color, all I have to do now is change my primary color. So if I change the primary color of this back to purple, my button and my label change, and everything else within my app. So you can start to build up your branding page with all of your different items. What I would normally do is have 1 or 2, maybe 3 different colors, and then I may have some of my other items that I'm using. For example, if I have a label that I specifically use as headers, I may actually call this the branding header, and I would set up everything within it. So I can set up my fonts, my colors, the font sizes, and I can reference those within my app. So very quickly I've got myself a nice branding page that I can use. And here we go. Magically I've got a nice little branding page. So I've got 3 colors that I can refer directly to throughout my app. I've got some headers that I can refer to for font sizes, font colors, font weights, and then I have my button. Now one of the problems we have with buttons is you'll notice that I went in and I changed the fill color to primary color dot fill. If we hover over, however, it still reverts back to blue. Doesn't look too bad in this case, but generally that's not the sort of action that we want it to take. If we take a look at why that happens, if we go down to the hover fill and pressed fill, you'll notice that the RGBA value from the theme is hard coded in. So we need to change that. So we can simply take the primary color dot fill and put that in there. So we're using the color fade function, which allows us to put in a color and then fade it by a percentage. So in this case it's fading it by 10%, and then if we look at the press, it's going to fade it by 30%. So it'll look nice. It'll change the color, but it'll be ever so slight, and it'll do everything we need it to do. Now another thing that you can do, if you would prefer, is in the button itself, instead of referring to the primary color fill, what we can do is actually refer it to itself. However, I prefer just referring to the primary color. It means that when we copy and paste these, that everything's going to work for us. So I will leave those as they are. Now what I can also do as I'm building my app now is I can just basically copy and paste these. So I can take that into another part of my app, rename it to the button that I need it to be. And I don't need to have to go into every single button and change all of the values. You'll notice that they stay exactly the same. So now I have my branding page and I can just copy and paste my pieces out and build my app. And if I ever need to change any of the colors, again we can show you here. If I just click on the color, change that to a red, you'll notice that everything in my app changes. So it makes it a lot more efficient, a lot easier. If you build an entire app and the users tell you that the biggest problem with it and the reason they won't use it is because of the color, then you can easily go back and change the color. If you don't do it this way, you're going to have to go back in, and anywhere you've used custom colors, you're going to have to recode them. Okay, so that's one very easy way to set up our branding, and we can just use the objects as references. But if you want to be more efficient, like me, we can use the variables to actually create these colors and refer to those instead of the actual objects within the app. So here, what I'll do is at the beginning of my app, in my on start, I'm going to create a variable. So I'm going to create a variable and I'm going to call it styles. And in here I'm going to set that to a record. Now in my record I'm going to have a value called primary color, which I am going to set to the RGBA value for my primary color. I'm going to have a secondary color, which I'm going to set to the value for my secondary color. And then I'm actually going to, just to show you how we can do this, create a value called header. And I'm going to set header to a new record. So header is going to have multiple properties. So firstly in my header I'm going to have size. So I'm going to have size 14. And then I'm going to have a color as well. And the color I'm just going to set to white. So here now I've created a variable called styles, and I can access any of these values and records within it. So let's just break this down so we can see. First of all, here we have the primary color, then we have the secondary color, and then we have the header. And within header we have again multiple properties for that. So how do we use those? So first we need to remember that we've put that in the on start of our app. Now our app, while we're developing it, hasn't started. I don't have to save, close it and reopen it just to get these variables to set. So I'm going to copy that for now. I'm going to insert an icon and I'm going to add the same code to the on select, and then I'm just going to press it. So now I've set those variables. So now if I go to any of my objects, where before I've been choosing the fill for my object here, now I can simply access this styles primary color. And again here, styles secondary color. Now what we also did is we set the size and the color for the heading fonts as well. So here in size we can access styles dot header dot size. Perfect. So now all we need to do is, if we need to change any of our branding, we just change the variables that we're loading. So here, change this to 24 instead. Now when my app loads, it'll load as 24 instead, and anything that refers to that branding variable will change. So now in my actual screen, where before I've been referring to the objects and the primary color, what I actually need to do is obviously change these over to the styles.primary color. And the hover fill, styles.primary color, pressed fill, styles.primary color. And then now we just get rid of these and add in some new ones. So again, in my app, when I load it up, I can tell it the colors that I'm going to use, and then the app will use the entire colors. One of the great things about this is once you have this set up, you can just reuse it in your app over and over again. Now, if like me, you're not used to using RGBA values and you prefer to use hex codes, we can do that. So in here, we can use the function color value, and instead of giving it the RGBA value, we can simply give it a color code. Oh geez, that should be double quotations. And if we press that button, so now we're using color code values instead. So that's a green. And let's pull this one out here. This is, that's the blue. We can also use straight up text values, so blue. So as long as those values are available in CSS, so if you look online you'll find those, you can use those instead. However, for your purposes, you're probably using your own branding colors, so we can just pop those in there. So a little bit cleaner. So now we're going to take this one step further. So where we were creating our variables in our app up front, we'll be typing in the color codes. Now that's fine if we only have 3 or 4 apps, and we just can copy and paste those across to the different apps. Now what if we have 50, 60, 100 different apps, they're all using the same colors? All of a sudden the color changes or the branding changes. We have to go through every single app and we have to re-add those color codes in. It's a bit of a headache, and I'm all for more efficient work. So here, what I'm actually doing is I have a data source, and the data source is in the background. And for these purposes, I'm actually using SharePoint. This could be SQL, it could be any data source that you have available to you. I use SharePoint a lot because as part of the developer tenant, you get it free. It works pretty much the same way a database does, and it covers a lot of the options for us. So here I've created a simple SharePoint list. It has a title field, then it has a fill field, color, size, font, and style. So in here I've put my branding colors. Now what we need to do is we need to get that into our Power App, and then we need to use it for our branding. And here now we need to see how we're doing that. So again, in my app on start, slightly more complex, but actually doing exactly the same thing. So I've created a data source called branding_1. This connects to that SharePoint list that we were looking at. The first thing I do is I go and I get each row that I need and I set it to the item. So here I set my primary color item. I get the, I filter the data source where the title equals primary color. So if you remember, that was the name of the row that had my primary color details. Now that returns what Power Apps knows as a set of records, but I know I only need the first and there will only be one. So I use the first function to get that. So now I have my primary color item set as that SharePoint list item with all those field values. I do the same for secondary color item, again for text item, and for heading item. Now you can keep doing this as many times as you want, and you can have that set up however you need to. Then we go through the same process we did before. So we create our, in this one I call it branding styles. And then we create a record which contains all of our values. So here for primary color, I've chosen color value, and I've inserted the primary color item dot fill. So my SharePoint item has a field value of fill, and I'm setting that into the color value, which should give me that. Again, I do the same for secondary color, and for text style, I have its own record, which has its field value, its color value, its size, font, and style. Now down the bottom here, for the purposes of the app, I've just created a collection of all of the different fonts and all of the different weights to use in the drop downs, which I can send backwards and forwards and allow people to select from. So then again, as before, if we look at some of these objects, if we look at the primary color label and we go down to the design, we will notice that the fill is set to branding styles.primary color. So exactly the same again. The only difference is that I'm going to my SharePoint list in order to get the colors and then set the colors on my app. So that means that all of my apps can reference that single SharePoint list. Now we do need to be careful, because it does mean that if 20 apps are referenced in that list, we make changes to it, all of the apps change color, which may be what we want, it may be not what we want. But it's definitely a more efficient way than having the same code hard-coded into every single app. Now this is just a simple little app that I've built that just brings everything together. So you saw before, I'm pulling in my colors from my SharePoint list. I have the current colors set on the left here, and I have new here. Now these new ones actually look to these values here. So I can change any of these values, and it will show me what the new color is going to be. These codes as well, they're not limited to 6-digit hex codes. We can use 8 digits, so we can make this slightly transparent. Can make it completely transparent as well. So these are just reacting to the changes in here, but you'll notice my current are not. So this is a way for me to have a look through and decide how I think things look, so we can change these to a slightly different color, maybe change the sizes on these and see how they look. Now here, let's just drop out of the app so I can show you what's happening. I'm simply using the patch function. So I'm patching the data source branding 1, which is my SharePoint list. I'm patching the text item, and I'm changing the field, color, size, font, and style based on the values that have been selected in these options here. I've also got save all, which basically just runs through and presses save on all of these. Now also what I've done is I've created a separate page. So if we click on here, and then we can see the current values and what they would look like in an app with my buttons as well. Now ideally what I would probably do is I would have my current and then I would have my new, so I can compare side by side. So what I want to do is be able to make changes to the branding, play around with the colors and see what they look like, and then when I'm ready I can commit them. So one of the things that actually surprised me and I was unsure when I was building this app is the fonts and styles. Now these drop downs refer to that array that I build in my app initially. So if we go and have a look here, we can see that I build font list collection, and I simply just typed in every single font in a line so that they're part of the drop down. Now if I use this drop down, you'll see that they exist there. So when I save that back to SharePoint, I'm just saving it as a single line of text. So here we've got my items font list, and then I save it as a single line of text. Now I wasn't sure if it would work, but it does. I can reference the single line of text from SharePoint into any font property. So if we look at this one here, let's find font somewhere around here, font. So for this one specifically, it's using that, but for the original one, it actually goes to brandingstyles.headingstyle.font. Now that is the single line of text, therefore the text that comes directly from SharePoint, and Power Apps actually understands that that is a font and converts it into a font, and the same with the font style. So it's really easy. I was worried that I was going to have to create a table that would do lookups and all sorts, but it actually did everything for me. Just another way that Power Apps has really proven how easy and adaptive it can be. So I hope that was of value to you, and I hope it gave you a good understanding of how we can do some different things in Power Apps with branding. It was very quick, so obviously there's a lot more to explore in there. What I will do is I'll try and make this Power App available as an export so that you can import it into your environment and take a look at all the different things that I've done. Thanks for watching. I hope the video provided some value for you. If it did, please remember to like, share and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Also head over to my website www.fluid-sharepoint.com. Follow me on LinkedIn and Twitter. If there's any content you'd like to see in future, please let me know.